you have to, at a certain point, be okay with a certain level of uncertainty. The people that I find that can't make the transition, that no matter what, it's like you line up all of your ducks, like you get your finances in order and you've looked at things. But this fear of the what if, like because you can't guarantee it, none of us can guarantee anything. Even if you stay in your job, I can't guarantee you're going to keep that job, But there is this paralyzing fear that like, oh, this big change is somehow scarier than it is. I have found that like, it's just your level of comfort with uncertainty is proportional to how big of a risk or how quickly you can take that jump. The whole profession of law is to catastrophize. So like think about every worst case scenario that could happen so you could try to prevent it. Or like, when you're coming up with a contract, you're thinking of everything that could go wrong in this, deal so that you could put it in the contract. And so humans already catastrophize because it keeps us safe and you have to think about that stuff. And to a certain extent, it's a good skill to have so you can anticipate some problems to help. But for lawyers, it becomes so debilitating because you do think that every small thing could be the end of the world. And so you have sort of trained your brain to look like that, to think about that. So then when you are in your own life and you really think the stakes are so much higher than they actually are, it's like a very hard thing to unlearn. One of the hard things with transitioning out of any role that I don't think we talk about is like, there's a lot of grief there. Even if you choose it, like I chose to leave. That's why it was really hard for me because I was like, why am I sad? Why am I upset? Like, I don't want to be a lawyer. Why do I have these feelings? And I think that you don't understand that, like, you're allowed to be sad for a lot of reasons and still choose to leave, right? And for me, and I think for a lot of clients and a lot of people I see, is like, you have to grieve not only that old version of you, but also that future that you thought you were going to have. Like you had created so much based on this identity of like, I thought I was going to have this illustrious career. I had thought about maybe I'd be a judge. I had all of these hopes and dreams as a lawyer. And when I was leaving that, I was leaving all that behind, and it requires actively processing that and understanding and being okay with like, there is a sadness and that's okay.
The next What Else If Not Law live small group workshop is coming soon. In this live experience, you will identify what is stopping you from taking action and learn how to flip the script so you begin. You will discover the 4-step system to map out your plan to leave your current situation and discover what lights you up. And you will leave the call with a roadmap. So head on over to www.womeninterestedinleavinglaw.com. It's all one word. Again, womeninterestedinleavinglaw.com, where you will see a sign-up box on the homepage. Hope to see you there. Hello and welcome back to the Will Podcast. I am so happy to be here today with Goli Kalkhoran, who is a master certified coach, life coach. She is a former attorney, and now she's been spending the last 5 or so years helping unfulfilled professionals create careers and lives they actually like. She's the host of the Lessons from a Quitter podcast, and if you've never listened to it, you absolutely must. And definitely share that with your non-lawyer friends who are looking to make career changes, because we do similar work, but she does it with a much broader audience. We'll see what's coming next for Goli. Where she uses her platform to de-stigmatize quitting work that is soul draining, not life affirming and giving. Like, we don't have to keep doing things we don't love. And she provides inspiration for people who want to pivot and create careers that might include starting over and building more intentional and fulfilling lives. So welcome, Goli, to the Will Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited to be here.
So I was just sharing with Goli before we press record just a little bit. And then we said, okay, let's just dive in. She came to join me and some Will members in the winter of 2019. Why don't you just take us back to what you remember of where you were then?
Well, what's so funny when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, going back to that, because I didn't even have a business then. I only had a podcast. So I started the Lessons from a Quitter podcast in July of 2018. And then I'd sort of made a deal with myself because I had to get over this hump, like the fear of putting it out there. And I had so many questions of like, what even is this? Why am I doing this? Where is this going to go? So in order to shut my own brain up, I was like, you know what? we're just going to give ourselves a year. We're going to do 1 year of a podcast and nothing else until we figure out, like, do we want to turn it into a business? At that time, it's so funny watching how things change. At that time, I thought like, oh, I'll get sponsorships for the business and I can make money kind of interviewing people because I really wanted to hear other people's stories. So winter 2019, I was still just, and I say just, but I was doing the podcast. I wasn't coaching yet.
No, you were not a coach yet. Not at all. Like it didn't even sound like it was on your radar from the conversation. You were still doing your photo booth business.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God. It's a blast for the past.
Started your podcast and you talked about jumping in and how you wished you had started even 2 years earlier. We talked a lot about, and these are themes that I believe you and I both see, and we both know and live as entrepreneurs who are constantly evolving, trying to figure out what's next. Like you have to take action and try something before discarding it instead of just staying stuck in your head. Well, I don't like calligraphy, or I do like calligraphy. Or like you still had your photo booth business, not coaching yet, and you really had just jumped in with doing the podcast.
Wild. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
How does that land when I play that back to you?
It's going to make me tear up. I'm so grateful for that version of me for just starting it because I had zero idea how this was going to turn out. And had I just tried to think my way, there's no way I could have planned this. There's so many things that weren't even on my radar, didn't even know existed. It's fascinating. I laugh at like what I thought it was going to be and how none of that came to be. But some things, just as beautiful came out of it. And I think I'm so glad I was naive enough to not know what was going to happen and think that something could still happen to push me forward to kind of do it, get started, even though I was terrified, like truly terrified to put it out there. I don't know, it makes me proud to really think about, it hasn't been that long, it's 6 years and how much has changed, how much I've changed, how much I've created. Pretty special to think about. You never really stop to think about it. You're just kind of going in your day to day. And it's interesting to think about that version of me.
That's beautiful. And before that, there was a version of you that was a lawyer that went to law school and Latham was in big law and then was a public defender. And would you tell us a little bit about your lawyer life and how you transitioned out of that too?
Yeah. I mean, I think that like a lot of people, I was just kind of the quintessential type A good student. And so I really didn't question anything. I was quote unquote successful by society standards. So I just went that path and I really loved law. To be honest, I think I'm one of the few people that loved law school. There was just nothing on my radar that this isn't for me because like anything I would learn about the law, in undergrad, I was a psych and a poli-sci major, but like I just was so set on like, this is it for me. I'm going to be a lawyer. Now, mind you, I didn't know any lawyers, which was probably a red flag. I didn't know how people worked as lawyers. I didn't have lawyers in my family. So, but even going through law school, I was like, I love this. I love the like gray area discussing, should this count as a crime? And what about this? And I like the like philosophical aspect, the theory of it. It was like my jam. And so I was just like, when I was at Berkeley, I was like in heaven. I like loved law school and I was like, this is amazing. And then I went to Latham and I was like, this is not what I thought it was.
Interestingly, I mean, I've seen a pattern. There are many people who love law school and don't like practicing law. Many of the women I worked with love law school because they love to learn. They love school. They love the intellectual rigor, but the actual life of being a practicing lawyer is not the same.
Yeah. And I think when you look at even like the structure of it, like when you're someone like me who was good in school, basically just lived off of external validation. Like I just needed someone to tell me I was doing something good. And so like there is a system in which you can get A+ or like an honor in that. And it's like, oh, I have something to strive for that I know I can hit. It is a drug and you keep getting it and it feels good. And then when you get into the real world, that's not the system. There's no grades. Nobody's coming and telling you, and so you're constantly in this anxiety of like, am I doing it right? Am I good enough? It drives you, I think for a lot of us overachievers, you go into the workforce and you're like completely kind of unprepared for that system.
Right. And it's through no fault of your own.
Oh yeah, you were just programmed.
It is absolutely how it's set up. It's like you're on this conveyor belt and then you're put out into this place where there are no more, I don't really love the term like atta girls, but like gold stars. It's how you were trained. That's how we were all trained. And then when you get out and older employees are like, oh, you shouldn't expect pats on the head. Of course you should. That's how you were trained.
Totally. No, you've been 100% programmed. It's very much like, a Pavlovian response. It's like a Pavlov's dog. It's like you expect, the bell rings and you want that, like you start salivating. And it's not even up to you where, like how you have these kind of wired responses. And like you said, I mean, I think even beyond the external validation, one of the things that I think school really kind of messes with us with is that you're learning in a closed environment. What I mean by that is like there is a possibility for you to know all the answers or for you to memorize everything. And so when you go in, you feel fully prepared. And then all of us go into the world thinking we need to feel like that before we do anything, right? We think like, I need to know all the information. That's an impossibility though. In the real world, there is no closed universe. It's an open universe and there's tons of new information and it's constantly changing. And we're not prepared for that because you're like, wait, no. I'm only being tested on chapters 1 through 10.
Yes, such a good point.
And so I think that's actually like the cause of a lot of imposter syndrome for a lot of women and so, I mean, for everybody, but for women especially is I think you had that feeling of like, I'm confident because I know everything. And then when you get out and you aren't confident because,
right, I know that there is a right answer. And in real life, there is no one right.
If I work hard enough and study hard enough, then I'll know the right answer. And then you're like, yeah, you can work yourself to the bone. You still won't know the right answer.
So you love law school and then
I loved law school. I got to LASM and I was like, this ain't it. I knew that, to be honest, going in when I went to law school, I knew I was going to be either a public defender or work in kind of some type of nonprofit. I wanted to do something where I was giving back and I was doing something that I felt really passionate about. So I wasn't 100% surprised. Like I figured I wouldn't like transactional work or even like litigation for like causes I don't care about. But I do think I was still jarred at like, oh my God, this is just what the day-to-day is. Like, this is mind-numbing. Why I don't want to sit behind a computer for 15 hours by myself. And, at the time, it's like check documents for a random word that might be misplaced. Like, it was just, I couldn't believe that, like, this is what I was doing. And so I ended up leaving after like I didn't even stay that long. I stayed, paid off my loans, which, in hindsight, I'm again proud of myself for doing that. I like did what I needed to do. And then I went and I became a public defender. And I thought, okay, well, this is going to be it because like I'm so passionate about this cause. And then I was there and I was like, oh my God, I hate this too. I cannot stand the day-to-day of this. And even though I did feel much more fulfilled in the sense of like what I'm doing actually might matter, then you just sort of become a cog in this wheel and you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm just part of a system that's so deeply broken and I'm like running into a wall every day, falling down, getting up and doing it again and again and again. And so I did that for about 4 years and I was just so burned out emotionally from that. And just like, this is not what I want to be doing with my life every day. And so when I left, so you said like how I transitioned out of it. For me, it was, I ended up having my son, my first son. So I left on maternity leave and it just happened to coincide with the fact that we had been talking about moving back from Arizona to California. We found a house. So we bought a house. So we were going to move. So I had to quit. I don't know what would have happened. I would have maybe quit at another point, but I would have gone back to work after maternity leave if had that not happened. I think that was the kind of the impetus of like, okay, you have to quit this job, this like safety net. You have to look for another job. And that was sort of the domino that started a lot of conversations of like, as I was looking for other jobs in California and I had this newborn at home and it was like, do I really want to leave him to go do these things? And like, is this really what I want to do? It's funny because it was like the quote unquote acceptable thing. Like it was acceptable for me to take 6 months off because I had a baby. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just like take a little bit of time because I can't even like think straight at this point. And so it started from there. And then it was like, but I really don't want to go back to like every, job description I would read. I was like, oh gosh, I can't do this. And so it ultimately got to the point where my husband was really like, not just supportive, but really like the impetus of like being like, why don't you just look for something else? Like you are absolutely miserable. You're going to make all of us miserable. You work an insane number of hours. Like this is just not a feasible thing. And so we sort of worked out like how long I could not work. And that sort of started it. And I was like, okay, well, and I found myself in this place of like, well, now what? I have no idea. I have zero. I have no other skills. I haven't done anything else in my life. I've only ever worked towards being a lawyer. I'm now like, I think at the time I was like 31, 32, something like that. And I was like, I have no clue where even the next step would be.
With a 6-month-old and living someplace new and having no clue and having some, like you said, you were burned out. You're emotionally burned out from the job and being a new mom. What next steps did you take?
So one of the things I did that I think was really key And now I look back, I didn't have all this mindset work. So I realized like how much it helped me shift my beliefs at the time. I wasn't doing this on purpose, but I basically was like, okay, I need to figure out what other people do for work. I truly did not understand what people did. Cause I was like, people say they're like a product manager at Google. What the hell does that mean? I have no idea what that means. Like I obviously I know like lawyer, doctor, engineer, like I kind of get that, but like there's just so many, like you don't know what you don't know. And so we're going back to 2014. So of course, like Instagram had just kind of started. There wasn't like, yes, there was online groups, not to say there wasn't, but like still a lot of meetup groups. This was like a two birds, one stone kind of thing. I was so exhausted by the time my husband would come home, like from being with my son. And I just needed to get out of the house. I was like, I cannot be here. Like I cannot listen to him crying. I can't do this anymore. And so like I would just once a week go to a random meetup group of any industry I could find, like in my city, and just be like, let's see what these people do.
I'm just going to be a fly on the wall.
Exactly. I just literally went to be like, let's see what they do. I walked into some of the most awkward conversations because everyone's like, what do you do? Like, I remember I once walked into a meetup of all male engineers. It's like, you know, like those movie moments where it's like the music stops, turns around and looks at you. That was literally, I was like, hi, you know, they're like, are you lost? And I'm like, no, unfortunately, this is where I was choosing to be. But anyways, like, so those happened where I was like, okay, this isn't it. But what was interesting is I was really just like finding information. Like I would go to them and I'd be like, I just honestly was like, even just the vibe of the people. I was like, I don't want to be with those kind of people. Like they, you know, and anybody that I hate to be mean to my lawyers, but you know, you go to a lawyer networking event, like they're not the funnest things. Like you kind of get the energy. You go and you're like, are these the people I want to kind of work with? Even if it's like, I don't know what they want to do. And so at the time I went to an entrepreneurship meetup, like a startup event. And it was the funnest thing I've ever gone to. Like it was like a Shark's Tank style type thing. And it was just the energy was, I was like, is this a joke? Like everybody's so happy. Everybody's so excited about the thing they're doing and everybody wants to tell you. And there's just like this, it was like not like no other meetup I'd gone to. And so again, when I say I was changing my beliefs, because I had such deep beliefs of like, I could never be an entrepreneur. I could never own my own business. I don't know the first thing about like, I couldn't handle that and stuff. And I would start going and then I was like, oh, I'll come again. They're like, oh, come next week. We're having this event. And I was like, okay. And I was just like, start going. And I started meeting people. And what was really great for my beliefs is like, I started meeting a lot of people where I'm not trying to be mean in any way, but I was just like, I'm just as smart as you. I'm smarter than you. Why do I think I can't? And you're doing this. Like I would meet like, you know, at the time I'm like 32, like I have a baby. I was a lawyer and I'd meet like a 21-year-old guy that's in college that's like asking, like trying to raise $1 million. And I'm like, who do you think you are? Why do I think I can't do this? And you're out here being like, oh, I'm starting this random company that I have no experience in and I know nothing about.
What I love about this is you had that mindset shift organically, not like trying to change your mindset, but just by being out there and being like, wait a minute, this 21-year-old dude, like,
it's just by opening your field of vision to what is actually, you know, I think for a lot of us, like we get so narrow-minded and like blinders on and this is the world and black and white and people do this for work and you can only make money doing this. And then when you like go out into places that you are not normally in communities that you are not normally a part of, the same way you go to another country, it just opens your mind because you're like, they do this.
You just feel like you see more. Like when I travel, I love traveling. I just feel like I'm just like taking more life in.
You are, and your brain is truly, because it has to make sense of everything. And so you're learning so much more. It was the same thing. Like what you're saying is like, it was just this organic, like, oh, I had never thought about that because I'm living in my own bubble that people don't think this way. And now I'm here and everybody thinks this way. And so that sort of started me, like long story long. By the time I went to so many of those, it was like the seed that was planted. It was like, maybe I could start a business. And then I would go for a couple more because I was like, I don't know what I would do. And then it was like, I would get ideas about how other people started their business. And I was like, well, maybe I could do that. Or maybe I could. And then I started looking in my life, like every time I had a problem, I'd be like, could I start a business around this? You know? And so it just was the snowball thing that sort of led to that first business that I started.
I love it. And that question of like, is there a problem I could solve here? So one of the things I'm starting to do now is coach entrepreneurs also. And I always say like, what's the problem you're helping people solve? Like, all businesses solve problems. So if you're listening to this and you have an entrepreneurial curiosity, like, I think that's a great question is like, what's the problem here I could solve?
Yeah. And that's one of the things I heard. And that, again, going to these, I would hear that. That's why I was like, oh, that's what I have to do. That is the first step for any business. And one of them that I think is the most helpful is like, don't create a solution in search of a problem. Like a lot of people start with a product and they're like, oh, I want to build this thing or I want to make this. And it's like, does anybody even need that? Like find a problem that people already have that are actively trying to like duct tape a solution to and make them a solution, and you have a market, and it's actually like straightforward.
Okay. So you started your first business, if you want to touch on that, because I think it's, because it was a really different kind of business than you're in now. So go ahead.
You know what's so funny? And I'll tell you what the business in that, kind of going back to looking back at what you built. So I built a photo booth business. At the time, by this point, my son is about to turn 1. We, in the Persian culture, tend to have very large family parties all the time, like not just for first, but like in general, but first birthdays are kind of a big deal. And so I was throwing him a first birthday and I wanted to do a photo booth, but I didn't want to pay $1,000 to have like, photo booths like you see at weddings. They have like attendance and prints. I was like, I don't want all that. I just want, people making silly faces and having fun. And like, we have these memories. And so at the time I went like looking on an iPad. I was like, there has to be an app. And there was nothing. This was like 2015, 2016. There was nothing there. And then my husband, who is an engineer, he was like, oh, I made something similar for his company, had made something for someone for a trade show. And he's like, I could help you kind of put it together. So I was like, oh my God, we should totally make this. Like we just need a light. We need an iPad. And so we did. We kind of duct taped this kind of solution together. It was really fun. And I was telling him, I was like, I think we can make something like this because I know there's so many people that have birthday parties and baby showers and, like bachelorette parties that would like to have like everyone lets loose. This was before, again, this was at a time when like there wasn't like Instagram stories and boomerangs on Instagram. Like Instagram was like you just put one photo of yourself on. So there wasn't this aspect of like silliness where like TikTok and stuff now are. Anyways, so I was like, people like this stuff.
And before everyone had a tripod and like could set up their own, their own kind of makeshift photo booth.
Exactly. So we sort of started on that road. And I don't recommend for your first business. I developed hardware. So I had to go through like manufacturing and learn how to do like boards and do all the stuff, like whatever. I developed software. It was way bigger of a lift than I thought it was going to be. I thought this little idea I had, but it was a really important learning thing for me because I think the main thing that it taught me is that I can do it. Like I still had doubts of like whether I could be a business person. When I did figure out, like I was like, I'm not an engineer, and I figured out I found a designer to design it for me. And I found, manufacturers to manufacture me a prototype, and I worked on the prototype, and I found software engineers. And when I was like, oh, I don't need to know how to do this, but I am resourceful enough to be able to figure it out, then I think it gave me the confidence of like, I can do this. And I will say this now, like looking back at the time, because I'm also like, as a recovering attorney, I'm a perfectionist. As I was doing it, I was constantly frustrated. I was like, it's not good enough and the product isn't that great. And let me tell you, like I manufactured the booths. I sold the booths to other people who started their own businesses. I had a rental business that I created like this new business model, not new, but like what I was doing was at the time, like people would pick up the booth from me, take it, set it up for themselves and bring it back. So I didn't have to do anything. So it became like passive income. Like somebody would come, take it for a week, like a company would or something. So I had this whole thing going. But in my mind, I was always like, oh, this isn't like good enough. This isn't big enough. Like I had all these thoughts. I say this now is like, my friend's brother just got married and he borrowed the booth for his wedding last week. And they came back and they were like, this is the coolest thing. Why don't you still sell this? This is so fun. And I was like, it's so interesting. Like I didn't give myself enough credit, I think, back then. Whereas like now I'm just like, yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's amazing. First of all, you realize I can do it, which I think is just one of the biggest mindset like phrases that
totally
that I encounter. I'm sure you still encounter, like, I can't do it. I can't. Oh, wait a minute. Why do I think I can't do it? I'm smart. I'm resourceful. And this is a phrase another, guest speaker gave me years and years ago, which is, wait a second. I'm smart. I'm competent. I'm hardworking. I can figure it out. Right. And I think when I tell lawyers that, they're like, yeah, like, wait a minute. I'm smart. I'm competent. I'm hardworking. I can figure it out. That just shift to like, I can do it. I'm like, you built hardware, software, created a new business model, and all the while, like in doing that. And I think the other thing is like, we don't have to have a perfect mindset to do things. It's like all the while you think it's not good enough.
Totally. And you just do it. Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that, we'll get to like why the podcast started, but going back to what you were saying is like, honestly, as I was doing it and I was around a lot more entrepreneurs. And again, I was like building my own confidence. One of the things I was constantly thinking when you're like I was like, the lawyers I was around were some of the smartest and most competent people I know, the hardest working, and yet they're doubting them. The reason I want to start the podcast is because I want to shake them and be like, look at all of this thing that's possible. Look at all these people starting businesses and all these people that have half of what you have in brains, in willpower, in hard work. And they're doing it. And yours is just because of the thought of, I don't know what I'm doing.
It's one of the reasons why I wanted to start Will also was like, I saw these incredible, talented, smart, hardworking women lawyers who were like, this is all I can do. And I'm like, it's not. Like, there's so much more. If you want more, like, you don't only have to stay a lawyer because it's like just what we do and be miserable because this is the lawyer life. And I think it goes back to that, what you were saying before about being on this like lockstep process and path, and like you study and you get the A and you do this and you make partner, and to step outside of that well-trod path can be scary.
Oh, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
So say more about that. How were you feeling about not being a lawyer at that point?
So at that point, I was fine with not being a lawyer for myself. It's the shame, right? The embarrassment, like what are other people going to think, or all the people I went to law school with, or, if they see me, especially for me at the time, I was like, oh my God, now I'm like a photo booth attendant. Like I'm selling a photo booth. Like I had all these thoughts of like, oh my God, everyone's going to judge me. And I still struggled with that at that time. Again, like because I didn't have a lot of mindset work, or I hadn't dealt with the identity of it, and I hadn't dealt with the shame of it. I was sort of trying to hustle my way out of that feeling. Like I was like, if I build something that's successful, then I can say, look, I'm successful. It was a good idea that I left the law, right? I was still trying to prove that. So I don't think that I was in this place where I was like, oh, I'm totally like zen with this idea. I didn't regret the decision. Like I was so much happier doing, even struggling in this. I was like, oh, like, thank God I'm just not working in that. Right. So I was very happy on a personal level, on a day-to-day level, but I still found myself like over explaining, trying to get people to understand. Like we would go to a party and someone would say, what do you do? It's like, I couldn't just say like, oh, I own a business. Like I'd have to go into this whole diatribe about like my whole past and whatever. And it was just from this deep insecurity of like, well, am I still smart enough? Do they still see me as someone that's competent and smart and whatnot? And it took me a couple of years to get over that, to like change that whole identity.
First of all, it's so relatable. So many women lawyers. That's something that keeps them from moving. Like, what will I tell people at a party? How will I explain what I do to my kids? Again, no judgment about it, just like recognizing it. And I love how you've said a couple of times, and I think this will lead us up to your journey into coaching, of like, I had all these thoughts. So noticing the thoughts, which I sometimes keep getting beliefs, right? And the thought is just a belief. Well, a belief is just a thought that we think over and over again, and then we ascribe veracity to it. So now you have this perspective. Okay, so then you started the podcast because you were seeing all these stories. So tell us about starting the podcast and what that led you in.
Yeah, and so the reason I was saying that I wanted to do it for like 2 years was really like at the time when I was building the photo booth business, I kept having this conversation. It would happen over and over again where in different situations, different meetups, especially the entrepreneurship meetups, but like I'd be at a party and I'd be talking to someone and they'd be like, oh yeah, I have this business. I do X, Y, and Z. And then we would get to talking and then I was like, oh yeah, I used to be a lawyer. And they'd be like, oh yeah, I used to be a lawyer. And I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean? You told me you have in healthcare. And like, yeah, I used to do this. And I was like, oh my God, tell me everything. When did this happen? When did you leave? Or I would like be at a friend's party and then like someone would be like, oh, she used to be a doctor. Now she makes chocolate. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I need to know the entire, you just tell me everything. I need to know what your parents thought. I need to know how you told people. Like, I was so surprised. Now, here's the thing. Like, when you all of a sudden something is important to you, you see it everywhere. Like you are going to buy a car, you see that car everywhere.
Called the reticular activating system.
I realized this was obviously a part of that. Like I was so interested in this but I did start seeing it everywhere. And I was like, when I was a lawyer, I never saw this. I never saw that there were these examples of all these people that had left these successful careers and then went on to do really amazing things and were so much happier. And like just this idea of starting over and evolving and starting something new. And so from 2016, I wanted to start this podcast. I was like, I just want, and I honestly was like for selfish reasons, again, because I was really dealing with a lot of that shame. I wanted to like have an excuse to reach out to random people to be like, hey, will you tell me about your story? Like, can you tell me how you did this? Because I'm still struggling with this, or I want to know how to do this. And I would also at the time get a lot of people that would ask every time I would tell people that I used to be a lawyer, they would want to know, like, how did you leave? How did you work up the nerve? do you regret it? All these thoughts. And so I was like, why are we not talking about this? And so I wanted to do that from 2016 and I didn't for 2 years. This idea nagged at me because all of the thoughts, what would people think? Like, who am I to do this? No one's going to listen to it. I'm going to sound like an idiot. Like all of this stuff. And like at the time, like, yes, I had quit, but it's not like I had made an announcement on like my, like, guys, I'm leaving the law. Like most of only like my close friends and stuff kind of knew I'd left and I was doing this. I sort of was like, I can't put myself out there because what if I go back? What if I want to be a lawyer someday? Like all of these like thoughts. Anyways, and when I say that this was a thought, like there was a pull to this podcast every single day that I was fighting. Every single night. There was so many less podcasts then. At the time, I would check Apple like every month to see if someone else had started something similarly because I was like deathly afraid, as if like you couldn't have the same podcast.
As if there aren't 2 podcasts about money and 2 podcasts about careers,
No, it was just like, oh my God. And every time I would see something similar, but it wasn't like my stomach would drop because I was like, I missed my opportunity. It wasn't until 2018 that I was honestly just so sick of my own thoughts. Like I was so sick of my own voice in my head being like, we should start this. And I was like, I just have to do this because I have to stop thinking about it. And so I have no idea what's going to happen with it, but I have to do it. Again, a lot of the reason I hadn't done it is because I was like, well, I'm still like I was part-time kind of a stay-at-home mom, part-time building this business. And I was like, I don't really have a lot of time to start a whole nother project. By the time I did it, when I did it in 2018, I just had my second child. My daughter was like 3 months old when I made the decision to do it. And I still had the business. And my husband was like, are you sure like this is the time to be taking on a podcast? And I was like, honestly, I have to. I can't explain it to you. I just need you to support it. I have to do this.
I just got chills. And when I get chills, it means usually there's some like divine intervention and some divine guidance. And sometimes call it the universe, call it God, whatever. When something pulls at you that much, whether it's an idea, for me, Will came to me I'd been working on the idea of doing something career clarity for lawyers for some time, but then Will really dropped in as like a fully formed entity pretty much. In the coaching I do, and I'm curious about the work you've done in helping people make like that. It's really something to pay attention to.
100%. That's the thing is we all operate like the statistics of like how much of your conscious brain is like, 10% or 5% or something. It's like, so it's like the vast majority of things are subconscious. And I think obviously the thing is, again, going back to how we're programmed, we're constantly taught not only to not listen to our intuition, but to actively suppress it, to push it down, right? Because you are taught like, it doesn't matter what you want. You do what they tell you to do. You go to school, you get up at this time, you do this, you ignore your body.
Right? You wait to go to the bathroom. You have to raise your hands.
You wait till this time. This is when you eat. Doesn't matter if you're hungry. So we are all very much conditioned to become disconnected from our bodies and to just do what we're told. And that makes really good employees, right? It makes really good workers for society. It just makes you completely like disconnected from your own voice. And I think that every one of us has had that pull where that for whatever, again, you can call it universe, God, you can call it your intuition, you can call it your own subconscious. You could say like, it's just that you have taken in whatever it is that your subconscious mind can't understand yet. And there's a pull in you that's like screaming at you. And you are just like, no, it's not the time. We're scared. We can't do this.
No, it's like having a baby. It's never the right time.
Exactly. And I have gotten better at listening to that. I think that like I was terrified then, but I think it gets louder and louder and louder until you can't ignore it. And you're like, oh, okay, I got to do this.
Right. Or until like in Big Magic, like Liz Gilbert, until sometimes there are ideas that are like energetic beings that want to come through to the world, right? So like Darwin and whoever the other dude was with the same idea about evolution at the same time. Really. So this is well documented throughout history. And there you were checking the Apple podcast list to see if anybody else the idea had come to them and they had brought it through to life. And so you jumped and you started and like it tipped from like, I had to do it or else I would be more miserable to not do it. The fear of not doing it overpowered the fear of doing it. And so then what? And you weren't making money from it yet when we kind of last deeply spoke about it. So you were 6 months in and you were having a great time and you were giving a lot of energy to it. And then how did the podcast lead you to some of the next things that came for you?
So part of like where it started with like, okay, I just want to do these interviews. Now, concurrently at this time, I myself got very deeply into like thought work and mindset work for myself. And it was like really finally dealing with a lot of the grief about leaving that identity and dealing with the shame, and also dealing with a lot of like beliefs and thoughts around motherhood, and unpacking a lot of my own thoughts about like stay-at-home moms and working moms and all the stuff that I had been fed as like a lawyer. Like I just was really still not in a good headspace. Like I was doing the work, but I was still running myself into the ground. I was still being a perfectionist. And so I had found thought work for myself because I was like, I'm going to die from this stress. Like I cannot live like this. And thought work started fundamentally changing my life, not in the way of outwards appearances. Like I was already doing all the things, like I left the law and stuff, but the level of peace it was starting to give me, the level of like ease my days were starting to have.
Wait a second. Will you just define thought work for people what you're referring?
So I specifically started listening to a lot of Brooke Castillo and the Life Coach School. So if you're familiar with her work, which is based on cognitive behavioral therapy, it's based on the idea that your thoughts create your feelings and your feelings create your actions, and then your actions kind of create your results, right? So your thoughts, whether it's subconscious or conscious, you have a thought about something. So just like we said, like that thought, if I have the thought, I can't do this, right? Or I can do this. If I think I can't do this and I feel defeated, I'm not going to take action. I'm not going to try things, right? And that's going to define my life. Like I'm going to not do the thing, and then I'm going to have a story about it, about how nothing ever happens for me, let's say. But if I know I can do it, if I'm like, hey, I figured everything out, I know I can do this, and I feel either committed or motivated or empowered or whatever, and I try and I fail, and I have these beliefs of like, I'll figure it out, that's obviously going to lead to a very different result. And so the thing that thought work did for me, and I will say it's the gateway drug for me to like, I was very in my head, and I was very much against like what I considered woo-woo, spirit. Like I was like, I can't meditate. I can't sit here and just like, yes, I know I have anxiety, but like none of this other stuff works for me. And thought work allowed me to be in my head and still make sense of like what my body is feeling or what was going on. And so it helped me start connecting kind of the dots of like, okay, like let's stay in the head and let's figure out what are these thoughts that you have about this. And so it gave me a formula to be like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. So like I have, like, how do I change this? And then that led to like more being like, hey, maybe there's something to this somatic work and to this woo woo and to this other stuff. And like, that has also changed my life. But this was sort of the beginning. And so I had been doing that work for myself.
And I think that kind of thought work is very attractive to lawyers also because it's very analytic. And like you said, there's a formula.
It's like logical and you can understand it.
Right. And one thing leads to another. Just for people, I call it TFAR. So thoughts, feelings, actions, results. So if you just want to make note of that and to work yourself through it.
Absolutely. I think it's for people that are very like logically left brain, like this is how we think. Like it is a helpful way to start kind of going into the self-help world, because some of it seemed a little too out there for me. And so I was like, okay, I can't do this. So that helped me. And then at the time I'm doing the podcast, and the podcast for the first year was just going to be interviews of other people who had quit. And I just wanted to tell their stories, which was great. And I loved that because it really did help me like just really like connect with a lot of people and be able to share a lot of different stories of like different paths, so that you can't just say like, oh, well, it was easy for you because you had money, or it was easy for you because you're a white guy, or it was easy because it was all people from all walks of life with all different backgrounds, with really like difficult circumstances, still making the same decisions for their lives, And so it was great. And then in that time, I kept getting the same questions. People would reach out to me, which was great. So I had people be like, it was so mind blowing. I was like, wait, people are listening? Oh my God. Like people actually like listen to my podcast. When you're recording a podcast, you're just in a room by yourself.
Tell me they've listened to. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. That's amazing. It's just me sitting here recording it.
Totally. I'm always like, I just think I'm like talking into the void. Nobody's there. And then people are like, I've been listening from the beginning or whatnot. But I kept getting people being like, this is so helpful. How did you get over the fear of telling your parents? Like, I'm also an immigrant, and telling my parents is X. How did you get over the fear of blah, blah, blah? How did you stop caring what other people would think about you? And so I started getting a lot of those like kind of more personal and just like the internal kind of struggle. And so over that time, because I got into thought work and I started getting into coaching for myself, and I started seeing how much coaching was helping, it just started opening my eyes. I was like, could I help people do this? Would I want to even do that? Because the idea of being a career coach never appealed to me. it just doesn't excite, like the way in the traditional sense. Like I didn't want to look at people's resumes or cover letters. I don't want to like help you search for a job. Like that was just not something. So in the beginning, I thought that was the only type of career coach for the topic I was doing. And I was like, I'm not going to coach. I'm not doing that. But then when it was like, okay, well, how do we deal with this like fear of what other people think about us? Or how do we deal with this, this internalized kind of like, this is my identity. And if I'm not working so hard, then who am I? And those were the questions that I was like, oh, I love talking about this. Like I love dealing with this.
Because really a career change like the ones we're talking about, like I tell people, sometimes people are like, are you a recruiter? I was like, no, you don't need me. If you want to make a lateral move, have at it. Find a great recruiter. Here are a couple of names. But the right job starts with an internal search. And that was what you were drawn to also, it sounds like.
Because I also saw, the same thing that I did, but I also saw tons of people who would jump from job to job, hoping that the job just magically fixed all of the problems. And it's like, but you're taking the same brain to that next job. So like you are a perfectionist or a people pleaser that overdoes it and has no boundaries and is burning yourself out. You're not going to magically go to another job and not be that person and all of a sudden have boundaries and stop working at 5:00. Like that's not how that works. And so I felt the same way. I was like, well, I left Latham and I went to a public defender's job. And I really was like, oh, changing this doesn't change like the nature of this work or who I am. And I really wanted to help people kind of at the root of like, what is it that you want? Like when we are pushing past the programming of what you were told you should do or what a good girl does or a good person or whatever, or successful, what is it that you want to do? And that work was much more exciting to me. Again, though, I had a lot of thoughts about, I don't know anything. Who am I? I can't help people. I don't have the expertise. I think a lot of us that come from this world also really believe like you have to have the degree. Like I kept thinking, well, should I go back and get my license as a therapist? But I was like, I don't want to do therapy. Like I'm not trying to do therapy with people. So I was sort of like lost for a little while about that. And then I started just thinking, what if I like invite people that listen to me to like a group call once a month? And I can just see if I can help them. I'll do it for free, but just to practice, like, do I like coaching people through things? Do I think I can? Do I feel stuck, And so I did that and I loved it. I loved that more than I loved the podcast. I was like, oh my God, this is where I feel the most lit up. When I'm actually working with someone, when it's not just me asking, but it's like me, like, and seeing them think about something differently and reframing something. And that like lit me up like nothing has lit me up. And I didn't expect that.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I remember listening to your podcast when you started talking about thought work. You were lit up. You were like, oh, I found like the answer.
Well, it's so funny, Elena, you say that again. Looking back, all of the stuff is like, oh, it seems like so easy. When I tell you I lost sleep over the decision to basically stop doing as many interviews and start doing some thought work and mindset, make it my own podcast for months. I was like, everyone's going to leave. No one's going to listen anymore. I started this as an interview show. Nobody cares about this. What if they hate me? All of this stuff. And it was so fascinating to like, have to get my own thoughts on like board with like, okay, but you get to create the show you want. And if people want to leave, that's fine. But really like now I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, of course. And it was like a great move for me and my business and what I wanted to do. But every step of the way is just filled with tons of fear. Like, I think that's what I do. I think people look at other people's journey and think, oh, it just like, she just figured it out and she just took action and it was so easy. And it's like, I was petrified the entire time.
Every step of the way is filled with fear and doubt, and we have to work on ourselves to overcome it every step of the way. Thank you for saying that.
I think it is something that more people need to understand, that it's not as though somebody has it together and is like, I'm just going to do this and it's going to be great. It's like, I'm constantly thinking, is this the right move? Did I just mess everything up? Like, am I going to regret this in 6 months? But when you do start listening more to that voice, kind of the signs of like, no, this is the right path for me right now. And so we're just going to be afraid and we're going to do it this way. But it's still hard to this day.
It's really, really, really hard. Yeah, me too. I mean, and everything we try and change. Hey, welcome back to this part 2 with Goli Kalkhoran of Lessons from a Quitter and so much more. We had so much to talk about in the first episode that I said at the end of it, I was like, hey, wait a sec, let's break this into 2. And so we came back on another day. And so Goli, thank you so much for coming back to share about your experience and help people, women lawyers in particular, who are really struggling with figuring out what else they could do to make a career change.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back. I love talking about this stuff all day.
I could pretty much listen to you read the phone book was what I was thinking about. Like at the end, you were like, I love talking. I was like, I could probably listen to Goli read the phone book. So Goli, where we left off was talking about you had just started, really coaching and thought work. And we defined thought work as going through that, debunking those automatic default thoughts in our brains that affect our feelings, our behaviors, our actions, and our results. And really using this tool of what Brooke Castillo calls the model, I call TFAR, thoughts, feelings, actions, results, to have new thoughts that shift our feelings, actions, etc. So you started doing that, and then you started the Quitter Club. So take us into that, into building a course and creating a community around that.
Well, so there was a little bit of the Quitter Club was kind of a couple years into my coaching, but I had created, basically I started, the way I'd said was like, I started doing just free classes like once a month just to get, and looking back now, I'm proud of myself for doing what was like scary, but I could still do it. Like I felt comfortable being like, well, I'm not asking anyone to put anything in. I'm just going to like kind of test this out. And I really started loving it. And then that sort of turned into, well, like, could I charge a small, really like nominal amount and get like a group of people that are going to meet weekly for like 2 months. And I remember it was like something so low. It was like $150 for 3 months or something like that. I just wanted to see, like, would people pay for it? Because people always say they love things oh yeah, I want that. And then what I've learned now after 6 years is like people will always tell you. And then when it comes to buy, it's like crickets, or they're like, oh no, I actually, right now is not a good time or whatnot. So I was like, well, let me see like what it feels like to sell this. So I did that. And through that was like where I started building a little bit more confidence of like, oh no, I actually can help them. Like I thought, because I was like, there's no way, I don't know what I'm doing. But then what you don't realize is like things that you did that now come easy to you, or you see in a different way. It's like people really struggle. Like you think you need to give them, this huge thing, and they just need to know how to take the first step. Like it's just like they're really stuck in like something that's might seem really basic to you. And so when we were having these conversations, it was like people were really making these really big changes. And so that sort of led me on. I decided to get certified. I decided to go to the life coach school. I became certified. And then at some point I became master certified. And then I started just offering coaching. And I started with I think I did some one-on-one, and then I did a small group program. And so it's taken a lot of iterations. I did small group programs for groups of 10 to 20 for like 6 months. I did a bunch of stuff. And then ultimately, I think in 2021 or 2022, I can't remember exactly. I think 2022, I launched the Quitter Club, which was a membership. It was basically like all the stuff I had done over the last like 2 years in my group programs, I sort of put into this membership. I really wanted to make it more accessible. I wanted more people to have access to it. I wanted to create a bigger community. I wanted a place where people could stay for longer, because 6 months, it was enough to like get you to realize what you wanted and learn like thought work and really change a lot of habits. It's not like you just are like, oh, now I don't need any support. Now I'm totally fine, And so I really wanted a place where people could just come and stay. And they have. It's been amazing. Like I've had people, we're closing it at the end of this year, but I have like a very strong group of people that have been in since 2022. And it's like we just work on a different goal and a different goal and a different version and whatnot. I launched that and it was amazing and it's been beautiful. And I've had hundreds of people go through it. And it was a mix of like coursework that they could go on their own, and then coaching every week. So I have different calls. Every month we had like a different master class. Anyways, I did that for like 3 years and it's been amazing and really hard. And it's a lot to deliver. And it's one of the things that I am glad that I do, because a lot of people always warn you against things. And a lot of people did warn me, and it was well-meaning, and they were right. It's not to say they weren't right. They were right about like, hey, a membership is a beast, and like there's a lot of back-end stuff, and the marketing is different and all this stuff. I think it's just having gone through this whole experience and this whole transition is like, yes, and you sometimes have to learn it for yourself. You sometimes still have to do it. And there's still so much value in that learning, and there's still so much value in what you create in that time. For me, like, I'm so glad I did it. And they were right. And it was like, it got to a point where by the end of the 3 years, I was like, okay, this is too much for me to kind of take on at this point. And I'm kind of exhausted from the delivery and the keeping up of a membership and a lot of the other problems that kind of came up with it. But I'm glad that I was naive enough to still do it, because I think like if I had I known what I know now, like I likely won't launch another membership unless I do things like very differently. But I'm glad I didn't know it. Like that, if that's a weird thing to say, like I'm glad I was naive to start it.
I bump into this over and over again, right? There's no one right answer. There's no magic bullet. No guru has the formula. I was journaling about this morning. Like the guru is in you. Hey, was what came out of my pen. We have to make the right decisions for us in that moment that are aligned with who we're trying to serve, what we're trying to do. And you did all that so beautifully in the Quitter Club. So I'm curious if we could just like kind of dive into that for a second, what you learned about what helps people make meaningful career transitions. I know that's a very big question.
I think that what I will say is that for someone to make a meaningful transition, you have to, at a certain point, be okay with a certain level of uncertainty. The people that I find that can't make the transition, that no matter what, it's like you line up all of your ducks, like you get your finances in order and you've looked at things. But this fear of the what if, like because you can't guarantee it, none of us can guarantee anything. Even if you stay in your job, I can't guarantee you're going to keep that job, But there is this paralyzing fear that like, oh, this big change is somehow scarier than it is. I have found that like, it's just your level of comfort with uncertainty is proportional to how big of a risk or how quickly you can take that jump. And so I've found that like that is the thing that you have to get comfortable with. Yeah, sure, make all the plans you want to make and think about the obstacles and think about what's going to come up. But if you don't work on like really befriending uncertainty and being okay with the fact of like, yeah, I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it's the right move. I don't know if this next job, because like, how could you know? Like you might even get like people have a job lined up. I see this all the time. One of the things I would see in the club is people would get like a job in the new field or a new thing that they want to do, and they'd be so excited. And I hated being like a Debbie Downer because I obviously am the one that's pushing them to do it. But I always would be like, okay, but let's just like, we might go there and we might still see like, hey, this still isn't it, right? Or like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Or how can I know that I'm going to work with people that I ultimately end up hating working with? Or like, I can't know that stuff. And so you just have to like, once you can be like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I'll figure it out.
But I know when you get to that level of self-trust, right? Of just with trust of like, I don't know what the figuring it out is yet, but I know, I trust myself that I will figure it out.
100%. That I think is like the key to being able to even allowing change and like stepping into change. And because that unknown is there, and no coach, no guru, nobody is going to take that away for you. So you sort of have to get used to like that part of the fear being there and still doing it. And I think the people that can get there then really can make some really huge changes. And for some people, it's just not there on their journey yet. Like they still just really cling to that control. And
it's hard to make those changes. I would say 100% I observe the same thing. And I think especially for lawyers, so let's take this down another level. And like, especially and if there's like, and let's just talk about the women lawyers you've worked with. I think that fear is so instilled often in big law and law firm culture that if you make a mistake, you're ending up homeless under a bridge, right? Like it's like, and they go from typo to like, my career is over. I missed a filing date or deadline, or there was a mistake. And it's definitely one of the things Will members, the women lawyers I work with, struggle with. What's your observation of this extra layer of being comfortable or befriending uncertainty for women lawyer clients?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's two things that lawyers tend to have on super dry. Like it's like everyone has it. Everyone's brain works this way. But with lawyers, not only are you naturally wired this way, but then you are literally trained. And that's like, one is catastrophizing, right? Like the whole profession of law is to catastrophize. So like think about every worst case scenario that could happen so you could try to prevent it. Or like, when you're coming up with a contract, you're thinking of everything that could go wrong in this, deal so that you could put it in the contract. And so humans already catastrophize because it keeps us safe and you have to think about that stuff. And to a certain extent, it's a good skill to have so you can anticipate some problems to help. But for lawyers, it becomes so debilitating because you do think that every small thing could be the end of the world. And so you have sort of trained your brain to look like that, to think about that. So then when you are in your own life and you really think the stakes are so much higher than they actually are, it's like a very hard thing to unlearn, to kind of realize like, well, like you said, like it doesn't really go from A to Z. You're not going to go from like, even if you lose the job, you're not going to be homeless tomorrow. Like that's just not how that works. And so you have to really like have your kind of conscious brain come online and be like, no, but what would actually happen if like I lost my job? Like there's a million other things that could happen before it gets to I lose everything. But our brains just jump from like, all right, this happens and everything is over. It's game over. We're done. The world swallows me up. And so you sort of have to learn how to like turn the dial down on that for lawyers.
And what do you feel like has helped the women lawyers you've worked with?
One of the things that has helped, I think I coach everybody kind of on this, but I do think for women lawyers, because I think they're very logical and very like, left brain need plans and kind of operate in that way. I always tell people with all of your fears, answer it. Like your brain's going to give you a ton of what ifs and a ton of like these really like unclear, nebulous questions. There is some truth to them. Okay. Like underlying it, there's a little bit of truth, but when you don't answer it and you let it go unanswered, it just keeps circling your brain. What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? What if I regret it? What if, and then you just spin in that question. And so like, I just always tell them like, answer it. Yeah. What if you fail? What if you go to this job and it doesn't work? What would you do? And then it's like, as soon as you kind of answer, you realize like, oh, I have 10 plans I could do, like I would get another job. I would go back to my network and do this. I would, or like I would say like, okay, because like, what if I lose this opportunity or my business fails? Or like, they're talking about like, usually a lot of times it's financial. What if I don't have, and I'm like, okay, let's go there. Let's go to the end. Worst case scenario, give it to me. Like you don't have anything, and it's like, they're always just like, and by the way, most of the time the worst case scenario is I'll get another job, which is where they're at. And I'm like, okay, great. We're back exactly where we were. Like, what are we so terrified of? But let's say you can't get another job. Let's say like that becomes the worst case scenario. What happens then? And then again, within a second, they have an answer, and it's like, well, I could downsize. I could move in with my parents. I could start driving for Uber. I mean, that's not what they're saying, but like for them, it's like, they just come up with something else, right? It's like, there are 10 different things. I know I could take care of myself. And I think when you do see that, it can help really calm the anxiety of this, hey, this belief of what if I fail, everything is is overblown. And typically when we really drill down to it, it's just shame and embarrassment. That's it. It's really just not even that. Like most of them say, it's so funny because I get a lot of people, I'm sure you do too, who are actually like financially okay. Like either they have a spouse or they've worked for long enough and they have investments or whatever it might be. Not everybody, but I'm just saying like, they're like, yeah, obviously need their salary, but it's like, I'm not in this place of like, when you get down to the nitty gritty, they're like, no, I'm actually okay. But it's just this terror of like, oh my God, but if I fail, because I'm not used to failing, and like, what happens? How do I live with that embarrassment of everyone seeing that I got fired from this job or my business didn't work, or and like, I think it's that shame, the not good enoughness, like that tends to be the underlying thing. I think what it hides under is just like this pragmatic, like fear of like, oh, money and what am I going to do? But when you like dig a little deeper, it's like, oh, I can figure out the money thing. I can't figure out, what is everyone in my law school or like in my law firm going to think when they see that I became a coach or when they see that I became a yoga teacher or whatnot.
So underneath that fear, right? Fear of shame, wanting to prevent shame, wanting to prevent embarrassment. And I think for the women lawyers I work with, also the identity, giving up the identity of lawyering. So if you could speak to that both for yourself and in the people you've worked with.
It's a huge, huge aspect. So I'll say from my experience, again, what I talked about before is like, I didn't really do a lot of this work until years after I left. So I really carried that shame for a long time and I just stuffed it down. It was just like, I definitely had like I spoke those words. I kept telling my husband like, but what is everyone going to say when I quit? And he was like, wait, you're going to stay and be miserable for 40 years so people don't talk about you? That's insane. Like, what are you talking about? And it really did help me reframe it. And I was like, oh yeah, like I'm just staying in a job that I hate so that nobody has a thought about me. Like once I started working kind of through that, I was able to leave, but I left with this huge amount of shame in the sense of like, we tie our identity, like the good parts of the identity to that. So, when I say lawyer, I instantly get people have certain thoughts. They think smart, hardworking, successful, like, we get those, like, you're sort of just like automatic, even if you're not, let's say you're not smart or hardworking or whatever, there's tons of lawyers that like may not fall into that, but you automatically get some prestige. You get this like pride. And so I really struggled with like, well, who am I if I'm not that? Or how will people know that I'm smart? I remember like I would go to parties, when people would ask me what I do, was like the dreaded question. I never had that dread because I was always like, oh, I'm going to law school, or, oh, I'm a lawyer. And I felt so like, I loved seeing like the surprise in people's faces, because at the time, like, I always looked a lot younger than I was, especially when I was younger. So like when I was like 30, like I looked like I was in my early 20s. So I'd always get like, wait, what? You? And I lived for that. It was like such an ego hit, you know? And so when I left, it was like when people would ask me, I would go into this like diatribe, like explaining my whole history. And like my husband would literally be like, shh, stop, enough. Like, you don't need to explain all this, because I didn't want to be like, well, what am I? Like, am I a stay-at-home mom right now? Because I was just getting the business up. Am I starting this business? But I'm not, I didn't really feel like a business person at the time. I can't tell you like how many conversations I've had like this, where it's like, even to this day, it will creep up. I mean, now I know how to handle it, but it's like, oh, when someone asks me, like, do I say life coach? And like, believe me, like there's thoughts around that, right? There was a lot of work I had to do later in understanding that my identity as somebody that is smart, that is capable, that is hardworking, that has like a really strong work ethic, that is, you know, resilient, doesn't change because I'm not a lawyer. I just don't do that job. And I don't need other people to see it. Like the more I got grounded in who I am for me, which is what was lacking in the first place. Like the whole problem was that I was seeking everyone else's validation, which is why I became a lawyer. And like when I learned to give myself that validation, I just don't have the need to explain. I don't have the need for someone else to know I'm smart. I know I'm smart. I don't need someone else to see that, right? And so then it became so much easier for me to be like, oh yeah, I'm a life coach. Or I do, like, I don't care what you think. You can have a thought that's like, oh God, another coach, you know, great. And what was so funny, just as an aside, my husband, I remember when I was struggling with this and I was like, well, what am I going to tell people when I'm not, like, that I don't tell them I'm a lawyer? And he's like, you think people are like impressed when you say you're a lawyer? They feel sorry for you. And I was like, what? But it was so funny because you're like, think about it from someone else's. And I'm like, yeah, likely people had different thoughts than I even thought they had about me.
I mean, I think that's the bottom line, is we have no idea what other people are thinking. And I have to remind myself of this daily. And I work with, you know, clients on it. So all the time. And another one of my favorite is like, other people's opinions of us are none of our business.
I mean, I think that it takes a long time to get there, especially when your whole life has been for other people's validation or that pat on the back. It does take a long time to like deconstruct that. I will say this, like, as something that is, I think, helpful for people that I didn't get to do for a really long time, and I really didn't learn about it, is that like one of the hard things with transitioning out of any role that I don't think we talk about is like, there's a lot of grief there, even if you choose it. Like I chose to leave. That's why it was really hard for me, because I was like, why am I sad? Why am I upset? Like, I don't want to be a lawyer. Why do I have these feelings? And I think that you don't understand that, like, you're allowed to be sad for a lot of reasons and still choose to leave, right? And for me, and I think for a lot of clients and a lot of people I see, is like, you have to grieve not only that old version of you, but also that future that you thought you were going to have. Like, you had created so much based on this identity of like, I thought I was going to have this illustrious career. I had thought about maybe I'd be a judge. I had all of these hopes and dreams as a lawyer. And when I was leaving that, I was leaving all that behind, you know, and it requires actively processing that and understanding and being okay with like, there is a sadness, and that's okay, right? And then I can let it go, as opposed to, for a lot of us, we just shove it down as like, move on, it's fine. And you're just carrying this baggage around because you have this kind of really unprocessed grief just in you of like everything you gave up. Like, I really thought about how hard I worked for how long to get that position. And I just walked away, and there is just this level of like anger and sadness and frustration. And I didn't deal with it for so long. And honestly, when I finally did was when it was easier for me to deal with, like, well, okay, I don't need to prove myself anymore. And so I say this to a lot of people when they're leaving, even if you choose to leave voluntarily, whether you, obviously, if you get laid off, I think there's a lot more grief and with layoffs and fires and shame. You have to process that in order to kind of be able to close that and leave it behind and not make it mean something about you and be able to move on. And I don't think our culture obviously like doesn't even touch on that. And so I think a lot of people are just carrying around shame for whatever has happened in their past, their career, and they just carry it to the next thing and the next thing, and they try to keep proving themselves and proving they're okay. And it's just so much easier to just let it go.
To feel the feelings, you know, like I've been in transition with my marriage, right? I'm ending my 23-year marriage, and it's the same, very, very similar. Let's say that. Grief, loss, shame, and what will people think? And, you know, knowing it's the right thing and it's still being a hard choice. And just like grief of losing a loved one, it will resurface at different moments when you don't expect it, as grief does. And I've learned through losing my parents and this experience, like I just have to surrender to the grief and then it passes. And if we, like you said, if we just shove it down and like it just becomes this like wet bag of sand, right?
Totally. Well, I think that's the thing is like we try to intellectualize it because we try to think like, well, I wanted this or this is for the best, and we hear all the platitudes of like, even when you lose someone where it's like, oh, they're in peace now. And it really sends this message of like, you should just be okay. You should be happy. Don't have these feelings where, like you said, even if I choose it, there's still human emotion around the loss. And this is I really look at grief as every chapter that changes, there is a grief. There's a grieving period. There's grief for changing it, losing it. Again, even when you choose it, like you talking about like divorce and stuff, I always think about it again. I wish I had a lot of these tools. I went through I wasn't prepared and I didn't realize I was going through this, but I went through a really hard grieving period when I had my first son. And I think like I was grieving, that version of me that didn't have children. And I think a lot of women go through this. And a lot of it is postpartum depression and stuff and hormones and all that. But there is just part of it that was like, yes, obviously I chose to have children and I adore my child and I'm deeply saddened and I'm deeply angry at this society and how we treat mothers. And I was very like surprised by a lot of it. And there was just so many complex feelings and all of it was okay. Like, I think I was scared again, the shame, because it's like, oh, this is a blessing and you wanted this. And yes, all of that is true. And there had to be grief. There had to be this grieving process for me to allow that to like transition into this new version of me and know that that other version will never come back. It'll never be. And that's okay. And like I can be sad about that and move on,
Yeah, exactly. You can grieve it when it comes up and move on. So I think this is a great transition, Goli, into talking about what's next for you, because more grief, because you are closing the chapter on the Quitters Club. And I remember, seeing your email that another coach I know was shutting down the program she had been doing. And I admire it so much, your honesty and transparency about what's going on for you behind the scenes in your business. And would you share a little bit about that transition? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to. If you listen to the podcast too, like my podcast, like I try to be as open and honest about what I'm going through, because I think that like a lot of times marketing can tend to be just like the highlight reel of like, oh, everything is wonderful. And I've seen so many people shut down their businesses or shut down offers. And I always hate when it's like just this like, yeah, this is why this is the best decision for you and for me, and it's like everything is this beautiful spin. And it is. There's obviously beauty in it, but there's also a lot of sadness and a lot of grief. And for me, I didn't make this decision lightly. And it took me I would say like I started really thinking about it a year ago, but a real 6 months of reckoning of like, am I going to do this? Am I going to not? And again, going back to the fear and uncertainty, like one thing I really want people to know is like, it doesn't ever go away. Like I get better at dealing with it, but it's not as though I'm like, oh, I trust myself now. So I just make any decision and I feel fully good. The whole time I'm like, should I do this? Should I not? I mean, the countless hours I spoke with my husband about it, with coaching friends and masterminds, and the amount I journaled about it, it was just really because there is no right or wrong answer. Like there is no, like it was quote unquote working. Everything is working. There was like 100 people in the club. It was going really well in that sense. Like I loved the community. I truly love this community so much. And I love this work so much. But there was just some things that weren't working for me. And I think that part of, again, allowing that to be like, okay, well, I get to say that this doesn't work for me anymore because I'm changing. And again, I say like, I look at like when I left the law, I want to say 32, and I just had a baby and I went through this whole process. And like now I'm, 43 and I'm in perimenopause and I'm just in a very different state as a human, like I'm evolving in a way that I could have never foreseen 10 years ago. I'm sort of on allowing that. And so I'm in this place truly of the unknown. I don't know what the next chapter is. I don't know if I want to continue. Like I knew that the club had sort of run its course for me and I didn't want to keep delivering my coursework in that way. And so I sort of just started with that decision where I was like, this just doesn't feel right for a lot of reasons for me and for my clients. And I really don't think it's the best thing right now. I just have to trust myself that like, for me, like I just have to kind of go through it blindly and I know I'll figure it out. I don't know when, But it's like, I really have to sit with some big questions of like, do I want to keep coaching? Do I want to even have this type of business online, like this kind of marketing, this kind of like visibility? Do I want to do something else? And that's a really scary thing because I do love it. And because I am helping a lot of people, and because the people pleaser in me, like so many people are like, please don't, go, or they'll say things like that. And I'm like, oh, I can't leave them in this state or whatever, which is like such a ridiculous thought, as if I'm like some kind of savior. Like they can obviously, like they'll be fine, but like this like guilt. And anyways, there's a lot there. And so I sort of got to this place of like, okay, it's there. And we get to still kind of walk into this unknown, and we get to like give ourselves some time to figure this out. And so I don't know what that looks like. Like I'm sort of in this place of, I decided to shut down the club at the end of the year. So I'm not like letting anybody new in, and I'm just delivering to the end of 2025. And then I also have a small like mastermind group of other women that are going through this kind of transitional period in their life. And then I really think I might take a sabbatical. Like that's just been really on my heart to do like 3 months, 6 months of, I realized when I left the law, even though I just had a baby, I was so in a terrible mind space of like having to prove myself that I just jumped in of like, I need to build, I need to show, I need to prove, I need to like have another business. I realized that I've never stopped. I've never like taken a moment to just like really be completely still. And I think I've convinced myself, because like this coaching business I have is really cushy. Like it's really ideal. I don't work, like I've started taking Fridays and Mondays off. It's not like I'm slogging 40 hours a week. And so it's easy to sort of convince myself of like, oh, this is like very part-time, and I'm making a good living, and I'm creating this business. And there's all these questions of like, well, what if it all goes away? Whatever, all that stuff. But I realized like, that's still a distraction. Like I still have never I'm still scared in this like productivity hustle culture that we have to not do anything. I'm still scared of the question of like, what do you do when I can't say right now that I have this business? What do I say to people? And I feel like that's a lot of my work, is like really learning how to separate my identity from someone that is doing always and someone that is take a little bit of time. So I've been thinking about that, and then we'll see.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like you said, and like financially, it sounds like you're going to be okay.
Well, and that was part of it. Again, like when I see with my clients too, is like, of course, I think it's a privilege to be able to take a sabbatical, and it's a privilege to not have to work. The funny thing is that I've had that privilege for many, many years, but I cannot get myself to do it because there's so many beliefs and identities wrapped up in, but who am I if I'm not also contributing? Or who am I if I'm not bringing in something? Or I want to show, and I think a lot of them are valid. I like a lot of my thoughts about like wanting to be an example and loving work. I do love, one of the things I worry about is like, what am I going to do with myself for, 3 months or 6 months? Like I get bored, and so I want to build something. And so there definitely is that fear, but I realized like this productivity hustle culture is so steeped in us that even when you don't have to hustle, we all do, because we're like, I don't know what else to do with myself. And I sort of want to explore that now. Like I see it still with people that are like retiring, and they still, it's like you can't enjoy your anytime because you feel like, well, if I'm not accomplishing every day. And I come from very much like a family and a culture that is like, it's just this competition to show who did more in the day. And I just can't stand that cycle anymore, and it's like there's like no room for stillness, and I just want to make some more room for stillness
and see what arises.
See what arises, which is scary. Actually, I'm a little scared of what's going to arise, but we're going to go into that abyss and see what there is.
And of course, my strategic, like entrepreneurial mind is already like, oh, you could document that and like, right, Substack and post weekly updates, or like what it's like to sit still. But then that's not really sitting still. I did a week on the Camino de Santiago, which is a pilgrimage. And there are routes through Spain and Portugal and France. And I did a section through Portugal into Spain. And I just did 1 week. For most people, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks to do the whole thing. And I decided not to post from that experience, because I didn't want in my head to be forming a post while I was walking.
Yeah, I think and it's like I've had a lot of this. I go back and forth, and I even like really, so I sort of have stopped really posting on social media. I do my weekly podcast like very consistently, but I don't post a lot so I post sometimes on stories, but like really never on the feed. And I stopped posting on TikTok. I keep getting the pull to kind of go back, but I know the beast that it is even within my head, because even if I tell myself like, you can just do whatever you want, like there's just constantly this voice of like, well, it's been a week now and you haven't done it. You should probably put it on and like whatever. And I don't want that. In one sense, I always do love documenting my own process because I think it's helpful for people to see that like everybody feels this way. And like part of my whole mission has been to normalize a lot of this stuff. But I feel the same way. I'm like, I feel like it's still just another way of adding a to-do or adding something that's like,
if the point is to be present to the experience you're having in that moment for constructing a post or thinking about, it takes you out of the moment.
Yeah, I've been thinking about, and we'll see, like I'm giving myself until the end of the year. Like now I'm doing this mastermind and this retreat. So I'm sort of like busy with that. But I was thinking about a lot of the questions I always ask myself when I do stuff is like, how can I let it be easy? How can I do it with something that's just like feels really natural to me? I actually like don't like posting on social media and I don't like writing really. I mean, I like writing, but I'm just saying like, I don't like newsletters and posts and that kind of stuff. And so even Substack, that kind of stuff is like work. But as a shocker to no one, I love talking. You know, the podcast has been easier for me to do to stay consistent, but it's still like there's a lot of post production and stuff that goes in that. So I have been thinking that I might, instead of like a lot of people do a Substack, but I was like, instead of a Substack, I might just do a private podcast where it's like into my phone. And if people want to follow along, it's like whenever I want to just like record into my phone and record what I'm doing, like that my thoughts.
Yeah. You know, some people are doing is like a private Telegram group, and then you could just talk into your Telegram one, and then you could download, I'm sure, and turn it into something later if you want to document it. I think those questions and these are certainly questions I ask my clients, and especially those who are starting their own businesses also. So I've worked with what I call willpreneurs, you know, women lawyers who are starting to like, how can it be easy? How can it be coming from your innate, what's just easy for you? And so, yes, are you going to keep the podcast going? I'm curious.
Great question. I don't know. I think that I have a couple of options. Like I've gone back and forth with like, I have like, by the time I'll be done at the end of the year, I'll have like 400 episodes.
Wow. Goli, 400 episodes.
I know. It's pretty insane. So I might just replay episodes. You know, I'm sure like people have not been following my podcast for 6 years. So it's like, and there's a lot of like really good content in my mind. So I was like, you know, and then if people don't want to listen, they obviously don't have to. So it's like, I was thinking I might just schedule replays of like earlier episodes. I might batch some beforehand. To be honest, I don't want to have the podcast like record it and produce it and make sure it's uploaded. I don't want to have that. I truly just want to have nothing on my plate if I'm going to do this sabbatical, because I think otherwise it just gets me to be connected to my email and it gets me to be like, well, I have to make sure I do this. And I just don't want that. So I'm either going to find something where it's like I'm repurposing things, or I might just take a break and say like, hey, I'll be back when I'm back. And if you're subscribed, like you'll get my next podcast when I come back in 3 months or 6 months or whatnot.
Yeah, you can share your lessons learned then. Like not everybody has to post from the messy middle. You know, some people are really good at it. I am not. One of my clients has started a Substack about her mental health journey, and it's amazing. I will link to that. Gwen Nightingale, who was on the podcast. So I will link to that. But not everyone is good at that. Well, Goli, I'm amazed. I'm impressed. Gives me things to think about in terms of will and how I want to continue and grow or scale back or do things differently. Oh, I did also meet a sabbatical coach. So if you don't have one or you want one, let me know and I can.
Yeah, I love that. There's a sabbatical coach.
There's a sabbatical. She does leaves of absence also. So that was kind of where we overlap, because a lot of the women I work with take FMLA.
I will say this one other thing, as you were kind of mentioning, like I will just, I guess, leave everybody with this, is that what's fascinating is like, this is coming up now. For the 7 years, if you even go back to my podcast, like a couple of years ago, one of the things that I talk about all the time is that how we are always changing and how we don't know what's next and how there's always chapters. And so even from the beginning, I kept saying, and I did feel really liberated when I started this coaching business, because I was like, I don't know what's next. I know that this likely will not be something that I do for 40 years. You know, it's just like, it's not what's going to happen. So there might be another business or another iteration of me. And I just say this. I mean, I did that when I was so in love with it and I was like, this is all I think about and I want to grow this and this is it. But I left room open always. So like, I don't know what the next version of me is going to look like and what she's going to want and where, you know, my values are going to be and what my children need or what my family needs and whatnot. I say all that to say to a lot of people, I think like we just really have to change our idea of what quote unquote success looks like because it's so antithetical to how humans are. Like, we've created this society, we've created this system, it's all made up. And somebody, had decided that like you start a career and then you stick to it for the rest of your life. And that's just not the way humans are. Like, you should change. You should be somebody different every decade of your life. And I think that, I'm not saying if you love what you do, you can't stick with it. You can. But I think that the problem is that we think, oh, there's a problem, or that for so many people that come to me too, think like, okay, well, I want to know what is the thing I should be doing for that. Like the next thing is the thing. And I'm like, there is no the thing. Like, and that can be terrifying. It can also be very liberating, where it's like, this doesn't have to be the end all be all. Because like, truly, if let's say it takes you a couple of years to like transition into something new, and then you do that for 10 years, and then you still have time to take a couple of years to transition into something new and then do that. I mean, there's so much time in that sense. I just say this is like, I sort of expected this for me. I didn't know when it was going to come. And I knew that there was going to be this restlessness or this feeling of like, this has been great and I've loved it. And maybe it's the end of the chapter. Maybe it's not. Maybe I still have a couple of years left. Maybe, who knows? But like, what version of me is trying to come out now and be like, hey, what am I interested in now? Like, when I first started this, because thought work was so new to me and was so transformative, I could not stop talking about it. Like, I just felt like it was like my job to go and shake everyone and be like, you need to learn this, And that was wonderful. And I love that for me. And I just don't have that same, excitement for it because I've now been doing it for 7 years, And so I say all that to say, for everybody else also listening, is like, it is okay to allow yourself to evolve into a new chapter. It's okay to allow yourself, whether that's career change or not, to say like, of course I'm not a different person than I was. And of course I'm going to want something different. And I don't know, maybe I don't know what that is, but there's nothing wrong that this change is happening. There's nothing wrong with me. And so many people have these beliefs of like, well, I just can't be happy, or I just am not. It's like, no, you're just a human being that is responding to all the changes around you, whether it's your family, whether it's the world, whether it's whatever, and all the changes within you. And God knows, for women, there's just always change within you, and you're like hormones and, pregnancy, all of this stuff. And so like, you should be changing. And this is all kind of part of the process.
Let's normalize changes and pages turning and new chapters instead of like this one thing. This one narrative of like, you should stay in this lawyer career or whatever it is from the time you graduate till then. You should stay in this one marriage. You should stay in this one relationship. You should stay in this one place. It was on an episode of the Glennon Doyle podcast, We Can Do Hard Things, where Sonia Renee Taylor was sharing, like, we live inside the imagination of the white man. And so what you're doing for yourself, Goli, and modeling so beautifully for all of us, me included, is pressing pause on that button and saying like, what if I just get quiet and still and step back and broaden my view of what might be possible outside of that hustle culture box, fixed identity. Let's see what happens.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to me, actually. I appreciate you for saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you doing this and talking about this. I'll be happily subscribed to your Telegram channel or whatever you choose to do to follow the thread, because I think this kind of modeling is beyond valuable. And I think it's what we need in order to create a new society.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And for now, do you want to share how people could follow you or connect with you for now? And knowing that that's going to change.
Knowing that it's going to change. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. For now, you can still find me really anywhere at Lessons from a Quitter. I mostly hang out, like if you want to listen to the podcast, that's where you'll get like all the kind of the updates for now from me. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts under that name. Or you can follow me on Instagram. Like I said, I don't post on the feed, but if you come in the stories, I actually do a thought swap every Tuesday where people submit their thoughts and then I swap it out for something that I think is more helpful for them to practice. So I show up in stories every once in a while, but that is becoming less and less anyways. So
like at Lessons from a Quitter, like, will you maintain your URL? And if people wanted to like opt into a newsletter?
Yeah, all my freebies and classes and stuff are on lessonsfromaquitter.com. So you can check out everything there.
Check that out. All right. Well, thank you so much, Goli. It's just been a pleasure. Be tuning into what's next for you.
Thank you so much, Lena. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Will Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please follow for more, rate and review to help another unhappy lawyer find her way here and see there's nothing wrong with her. You can also please share it with a friend. To learn more about how will can guide you to clarity, freedom, and relief, go to www.womeninterestedinleavinglaw.com and book your confidential consultation. Where there's a will, there's a way. Let's get you on your way today.